A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות I-24 News.
I-24 News launches its fourth channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
I-24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, I-24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on I-24 News.
Hello everyone, this is I-24 News. First, our headlines. After the rescue of 4 Israeli hostages, what's next for the other 120? We'll have international and Arab reaction. And tensions inside Israel rise as the so-called unity government is about to break up tonight. 4 Israeli hostages are in good medical condition in Israeli hospitals tonight after a rescue operation in which 1 Israeli commander was killed, as well as a large number of Palestinians. Still, 120 hostages are held by Hamas in Gaza. I-24 News correspondent Zach Anders is standing by live at a Sheba hospital with the latest from there. Zach.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, it continues to be a parade of family and friends coming through the hospital, getting the chance to see their loved ones. 3 of the men that have been freed are here. Noah Argamani, the female freed hostage, she's at Ishlav Hospital across town with her mother who has terminal brain cancer. We've been able to hear from the families. It sounds like that reunion with Noah and her mother has taken place. Very emotional, obviously, and it does sound like the disease, the cancer for her mother has progressed significantly. So back here at Sheba, where the 3 remain, we are expecting to hear another update sometime tonight. We're hearing that they, of course, they just want to go home. But after yesterday's observation with the doctors, the medical staff are apparently going to make another assessment. We could hear sometime tonight whether or not they will be going home. No immediate physical trauma is being reported. Of course, the psychological trauma is something that's being paid very close attention to by the trained professionals that have been brought in for just this reason. Outside of that, you know, the families, of course, have spoken very briefly to the media and all these cameras that have set up in this lobby here of the hospital. But obviously, this is a very traumatic experience. So giving the families and friends plenty of room, no need to rush the cameras in anybody's faces at this point. And this is something that the families say in time they will begin to share and talk more about these experiences. They have, we've seen on Channel 12 here in Israel reporting a bit about Noah's experience in particular. She is telling her family, and the family is telling the media that that she was moved around several times, that she was primarily kept inside the family of a doctor, and that this experience with the doctor, they made sure that she had food whenever she asked. She pleaded apparently for a long time. It's unclear exactly how long, but for a long time to have a shower. And the family finally relented and provided some sort of way to take a shower. One of the more remarkable things you just wouldn't think about, I guess, at this stage, but 240 plus days being inside and obviously being hidden. It sounds like she spent most of that time in that bedroom. Was moved, she said, to a few times to different locations in the early days of the war. Also said that she saw other hostages in the early days of the war before settling in that Nusrat refugee camp with that family, where she was eventually rescued and freed. One of the more remarkable elements, too, of her experience, she told her family that she spent so much time interacting with the family that held her captive that she learned to speak Arabic.
Right. Zach Anders, thank you very much for this report. More on the aftermath of the rescue operation. I-24 News' Bianca Zanini reports.
Thank you. for bringing my son to me, to us. I'm so excited that I could hug him today.
Joy and celebration as Israel marked the rescue and safe return of 4 hostages held in Gaza for 8 months. Sure to boost the battle spirit of soldiers, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took the moment to remind the nation and the world of why he believes Israel must continue the war in Gaza.
This operation required ingenuity and courage of the highest degree, and our soldiers performed in an unmatchable way. We're committed to getting the release of all the hostages, and we expect Hamas to release them all. But if they don't, we'll do whatever it takes to get them all back home.
The heartwarming moments of families reunited were much needed after weeks, if not months, of growing dissatisfaction with the government's handling of the war. A criticism that has not gone away. Saturday night's weekly protests against the government and to release the hostages continued.
Over a long period, Israelis have been on a daily basis hearing news that are quite negative on all fronts. And all of a sudden there is this event that plays into the historical image of the IDF, of the Israeli solidarity, of the military going in and heroically saving and rescuing 4 hostages. That's a big sigh of relief for the Israelis, but it's not undermining the challenges that we all know are lying ahead. And we know that it's only 4 out of another 120 hostages that are still held in Gaza.
But the rescue might have bought Netanyahu some time in the political arena. Saturday was the deadline set by War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz for the government to dismantle Hamas and present a post-war Gaza plan, amongst other points, or else he would leave. But Gantz cancelled the press conference he was scheduled to give in the evening and is reportedly, quote, considering where things stand. The rescue operation, during which at least 210 Palestinians were reportedly killed, was made with the help of U.S. intelligence.
So I want to echo President Macron's comments welcoming the safe rescue of 4 hostages that were returned to their families in Israel. We won't stop working until all the hostages come home and a ceasefire is reached. That is essential.
The big question now, how, if at all, does this rescue operation affect the possibility of a ceasefire for hostages deal coming to fruition?
So more on this, obviously. Here in the studio with me are former Ambassador Michael Harari. Thank you very much for coming. And Lieutenant Colonel Doron Avital, former Commander of Special Forces at IDF. Thank you for coming, and you are very much familiar with these kind of operations. What can you tell us about it?
It's the other unit. It's Yamam. I was commanding Sayeret Matkal. A great operation, meticulously executed. Weeks of training. From what we learned, it means that the forces had to plan 2 sites simultaneously. They had to decide what would be the window of opportunity. They decided on a daytime. We remember that the last time we operated in Rafah, it was at night. It means there were considerations that timed it to the daytime, it was 11 a.m. The whole planning around it. I mean, there are 3 stages to start an operation. There's the covert approach to the destination, which was not easy. You shouldn't be noticed. You do it undercover. Then the breaking in simultaneously. This is the loud stages, as we call it. This means that the whole neighborhood refugee camp wakes up. You have now to rush. And then you have the evacuation, which requires all the firepower that you have, and then other units participating. And it was a very successful operation. Unfortunately, we lost a commander in the raid.
Right. Ambassador Harari, what does it say for the rest of the hostages, for the future?
Well, as Doron said, basically, I mean, this is a great operation. Clearly, I mean, after so many weeks and months, at last, it's very good news. It doesn't change substantially the Israeli dilemma. I mean, I suppose it's quite clear to Israel that as long as it needs to keep on the pressure, the military pressure, there is no any other way, let's say, to release the rest of the hostages other than a deal. And this is going to be, I mean, this is still very much, the dilemma here in Israel, facing Biden's initiative, facing different reports about what is included in this initiative.
Right. Many experts here, Doron, say in Israel, it's a great operation. We will not be able to rescue 120 or even half of this that way.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, there's no way we can rescue all those 120, whoever is alive. They're in different size, different complexities, intelligence. Think what kind of energy, planning, and forces. The head of the IDF himself was in the commanding post. This is a mega operation. So we can't facilitate those operations for all the 120. And the dilemma is still here, the dilemma of the hostage deal. The question how it would affect the hostage deal. My first reaction on Saturday that it might say to Hamas, signal to Hamas that their time also might run out, because this intelligence that led us to the hostages might lead us next to the whereabouts of Sinwar, who knows? So they have to think that as we make progress and intelligence is being gathered, it can also affect them. I'm not sure. Their proclamation right now are very tough, very firm against, but who knows? I don't know what's going on underneath.
So basically, we're still at the same point, even though that was very dramatic yesterday, and of course, an enormous emotional day for many Israelis. We're at the same point with the hostages.
I believe we are. Secretary Blinken is coming to Israel tomorrow. I suppose in order to make sure that Israel understands that we are in the same page, and we need to go ahead, and we need, let's say, to get guarantees from the Americans, from the others as well, but we are in the same situation. This is why I said, I emphasize the dilemma remains critical to Israel.
Pretty much the same, yeah. More on the reaction in the Arab world. Here's I-24 News correspondent Ariel Osran.
Saturday's daring daytime operation in the heart of central Gaza caught Hamas completely by surprise. And also in the region, there was much focus on the Hollywood-like operation. Saudi English-speaking newspaper Arab News focused on the high death toll based on Hamas numbers, while Asharq al-Awsat carried the headline, "Hostage rescue in Gaza turns into a bloodbath." Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas said he would request an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council following the raid on the Nuseirat refugee camp.
حيث أدانت مصر بأشد العبارات في بيان صادر عن وزارة الخارجية أدانت الاعتداءات الإسرائيلية على مخيم النصيرات بوسط قطاع غزة في انتهاك سافر لكافة أحكام القانون الدولي والقانون الدولي الإنساني ولجميع قيم الإنسانية وحقوق الإنسان.
In a similar condemnation, Jordan said it holds Israel responsible for the high death toll in Nuseirat, as dozens gathered outside the Israeli consulate in Amman in protest. Kuwait, Oman, and Turkey also condemned the operation. Similar demonstrations were held in multiple cities across Morocco, while in the West Bank city of Nablus, protesters called on Hamas's military wing to increase terror attacks. Beyond the high death toll, which does not differentiate between civilians and combatants, some of the criticism among Arab-speaking media was the alleged use of an aid truck by Israeli forces as cover, as well as the exfiltration of the hostages while using the American aid pier in Gaza. Some users on social media even went as far as calling Saturday's operation the American operation. While the IDF denies the allegations, it illustrates how a single incident can sway Arab public opinion against Israel. As for their governments, they have remained mostly muted in the wake of the attack, seen as an embarrassment to Hamas and an impressive yet tactical achievement by Israel.
Now, Loai Al-Sharif is with us from Abu Dhabi. Good evening, Loai.
Good evening, Jacob.
Well, what's the reaction to yesterday's events over there?
Well, my personal reaction, first of all, I believe that everyone should be relieved that 4 hostages are released, including Noah. And of course, no one would be happy about all the Palestinians who died in this operation. But I always say this, Jacob, and this is my personal assessment and my personal opinion, that this war can end today if Hamas releases the hostages and lay down its arms. So Hamas could have prevented all of this bloodshed if it just didn't start the war on October 7th. That's my personal opinion. That's my take. Now, I believe that so many things are happening on the ground when it comes to the officials' statement by the Arab states, including the UAE. The UAE condemned today in a statement, condemned the continuous aggression in Gaza. But it's so interesting that the latest statement broadcasted by the UAE MOFA did not mention Nusayrat in particular. But of course, everyone would have wanted to stop this war and not to begin with, absolutely not to have this war started anyway on October 7th when Hamas waged this war against Israel by kidnapping the elderly, women and children from a supernova music festival and from other kibbutzim as well to start this war. So everyone wants this war to end, but we all know that everyone wants this war to end the right way, the way that October 7th is not again repeated. And of course, in a way that we should have someone who would govern Gaza in a way that is progressive. We don't want Hamas or Alibaba and the 40 thieves.
What are the main concerns of the UAE regarding Gaza right now?
The main concern, Jacob, for you and for your audience to know, the main concern for the UAE, from the official statements, from the statements by the MOFA, by Sheikh Abdullah himself, by everyone in the country, is the humanitarian crisis that is happening right now. The people of Gaza. This is why the UAE continues to do the Gallant Nights or the Chivalrous Night operation. Just today, the UAE announced that it helped the Palestinians in Khan Yunis area and other areas of Gaza with lots of aid. That is the main thing that the UAE focuses on. And by the way, Jacob, I want to tell you one thing. It was an option to sever the relations with Israel, but the UAE maintained these relations for the sake of the Palestinians. And the UAE is using these relations to help the Palestinians even more and more. The Palestinians, not Hamas. The Palestinians, the innocent Gazans, the Palestinian people who deserve to live in dignity, who should not suffer because of Hamas and because of this unnecessary war that was waged on October 7th. So that is the main concern. So when you follow the social media of the UAE accounts, the MOFA and the Gallant Night and all similar accounts, you would see that the main concern and the main focus is to help the civilians, to stop this war, to reach a ceasefire that is meaningful, of course, not a ceasefire that would end again in having another October 7th or having Hamas to rule Gaza again or Alibaba and the 40 thieves.
And the peace accord is the platform to facilitate these concerns by the UAE. That's what you're telling me.
Yes, and of course, the peace accords, the collaboration with Israel, because lots of aids were dropped or were even entered Gaza in coordination with Israel. So, but the thing is that the relation with Israel is used first and foremost for the Palestinian people, and this is why the Abraham Accords were set in motion in 2020. If you remember, Jacob, when the UAE said we will go with the Abraham Accords, was to stop the annexation of the West Bank, the annexation of settlements, to freeze the settlements. And that's what the UAE said back in 2020. But of course, you have to do your job as well as Palestinians. And when I speak about the Palestinians, I'm referring to the PLO, and of course, there is no single Palestinian opinion. You have the PLO in the West Bank, and you have Hamas and the militants in Gaza. There is no agreement. You don't have a single Palestinian opinion. There has to be a great reform in order to lead the Palestinian people to a dignified life that they deserve, and to live side by side with their Israeli neighbors, and to prosper and thrive. The Palestinians deserve that, and that's what the UAE is backing big time, strenuously and vehemently.
All right, La'al Sharif, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jacob.
Ambassador Harari in the studio. So it is an Israeli commitment to allow humanitarian aid to Gaza, even though Hamas may benefit from this. That's the conflict here.
It is, but I think Israel nowadays believes or understands the importance of humanitarian aid. I think that it took Israel a few months, let's say, to understand how much it is important to be seen as pushing as much as possible, knowing that some of the aid will be, of course, controlled by Hamas. But as your correspondent said, the most important, let's say, thing from the Arab point of view, Arab public opinion point of view, is to assist the Palestinian people. If I may add, the gap between the regimes, the governments, and the public opinion is not very much, surprising, but it's very interesting. Imagine in the past, if I would tell you that Israel is in war against the Palestinians for 8 months, wouldn't you expect, let's say, Arab countries to cut its relations with Israel? And it has not happened. It has not happened because, as we said, they do not want Hamas to come out of this war much more stronger, but they want Israel, let's say, to enable humanitarian assistance and to single the alternative to Hamas.
And the question to you, Doron, is what is the Israeli strategy here? How long will Israel be able to do the same thing?
Exactly. The question is what's the end game? Because right now we're in the midst of a guerrilla warfare. While in the north of Hezbollah we have a war of attrition, this is a guerrilla warfare in Gaza, and they're using this infrastructure of tunnels, the biggest surprise that we had to confront. And how much longer can we conduct this guerrilla warfare without an end limit to the game? And I think an end limit would be, in the end, have to be along the doctrine of Biden. And my feeling, it has to involve the Palestinian Authority in some fashion. Otherwise, I don't see any venue. In terms of humanitarian aid, I want to concur. I think it was a stupid mistake, even, I would say, on our behalf, to play with this humanitarian aid from the beginning. It was a sort of some kind of misguided idea that some of our generals even took this position. Humanitarian aid as much as possible, and an end game to the story.
Okay. The question is, how much leverage does Qatar have over Hamas? And to discuss this, we have columnist Anshal Vora from Foreign Policy Magazine. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
There are reports that Qatar is threatening to sanction and expel Hamas leadership from Doha. Do you buy this, first of all?
I'm not very sure, to be honest. It's not impossible. It is possible because at the end, as far as my understanding goes, Qatar values its relationship with the U.S. above its quite prominent and heartfelt sympathies for the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause. And in that context, I can see it happening. But when I look at the reporting, I would like to sort of look more deeply into it and think of where is the story coming from. Because according to my own sources in Qatar, last I spoke to them should be about 1.5 months ago, they had not asked Hamas, they had not threatened Hamas with expulsion. And even then, these reports were floating around. So I'd say with a pinch of salt, I think they're still hedging their bets in a different direction, and that is that there could be a more enduring ceasefire before Hamas releases hostages, because my understanding is that Qatar actually backs principally and ideologically Hamas's position that in exchange for Israeli hostages, Israel should agree to a permanent ceasefire.
What would be the Qatari consideration of whether to leave the leadership there or to expel them? What are the the yes and no's, the against and for?
I think the for is the Hamas has stayed there because, as I said, Qatar is sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. One, because it actually respects the Palestinian struggle. Secondly, quite genuinely, and secondly, because it has this notion of itself being a small state, that smaller states should have their own should have a right to exist. So in that context, they really push for the validity of the international law. Also, because this is a great sort of story to attach oneself to in the Arab world, to have prominence in the Arab world, but also broadly in globally, I would say. But against, I think the consideration is and has been, how will the U.S. react? Now, some senators in the U.S. have actually threatened or said that the U.S. should withdraw the major non-NATO ally status that Qatar has if Qatar does not manage to get Israeli hostages out and doesn't manage to exert enough influence over Hamas. My understanding is that the Qataris think that these people in the U.S. who've asked for the non-NATO ally status to be withdrawn are close to Netanyahu, and it was done at Netanyahu's behest, and they haven't really taken it seriously enough or don't think of it as particularly the position of the Biden administration. Again, though, having said that, in the end, for Qatar, it really comes down to its relations with the U.S. And whilst it feels quite firmly for the Palestinian cause, and in this sense that kind of translates into its support for Hamas, it does not, it won't go ahead, it won't continue with it if it comes at the cost of its relationship with the United States. So the big consideration in asking Hamas to leave or expelling or threatening them with expulsion would be, what were the words of U.S.'s warning to Qatar? That would be the deciding factor, I think.
Will Qatar support the Palestinian Authority taking over Gaza?
So from the beginning, when I say beginning, I mean since October 7, one has been talking to people in the Palestinian Authority, and there's been a sense that the PA is essentially saying, we will decide what the next leadership is, and rightly so, and the leadership will be a representative of Palestinian people, and both Fatah and Hamas are representatives of Palestinian people, and we will form the next sort of party or group or whoever takes charge of Gaza, and we will decide who that is. But I think there's been a lot of talk between Fatah and Hamas, at least signals that it's going to be one thing. Now, Abbas has visited Doha. That does not mean that Qatar is necessarily supporting PA, but it does mean that it is open to supporting PA. And in the end, Qatar's support, in my view, Qatar's support for Hamas is not, it could support PA too. It could support Hamas, it could support PA. It's actually supporting the Palestinian right to exist as a state. So in that sense, I can see them being open to PA in time. And for them, Hamas is just the armed wing of a struggle to have their own state.
Okay, Arnon Zamora, thank you very much for that. Thank you. We'll take a short break, and we'll be right back with more special coverage here on I-24 News. Stay tuned.
Israel's story must reach the whole world. The I-24 News Channel, broadcasting from Israel, with dozens of correspondents throughout the world, brings the truth from Israel to hundreds of millions of people in scores of countries.
Completely gunned down in their beds.
De la frontière qui sépare Israël.
The state of emergency and war in Israel.
Bringing Israel's story to the world. I-24 News Channels. Now on Hot.
Hello everyone, welcome back. Let's go to Lebanon-Israel border. Hezbollah is raising its scope of attacks on Israel, both in quantity and quality. Here's more in the next report.
Hezbollah's drones are increasingly slipping past Israel's defenses. Recent advances in the terror group's UAV technology have made these drones harder to detect and intercept. On Wednesday, a drone attack on the village of Hofesh resulted in the death of an Israeli soldier and injured 11 others. Alarmingly, there were no prior infiltration alerts.
Hezbollah is definitely challenging Israeli technology. On the one hand, what you want to do is to have more alarms to make sure that you don't get inside drones that you have not detected. There is no clear-cut, easy answer right now.
But what makes Hezbollah's drones successful at evading Israeli radars? Analysts suggest that tweaks in drone components that allow them to fly at lower altitudes and utilize complex flight paths are making them difficult to detect. While Israeli technology is trying to adapt, this has led to an increase in false alarms.
The rise in the number of false alarms comes out of the challenge that Hezbollah is trying to test us. So what you do is you make your systems that much more sensitive. When you make them more sensitive, it can be that a flock of birds will do something similar to what a UAV, an unmanned aerial vehicle, or a drone would look like, and that just adds into the challenge. Israel is a country that has enormous bird flocks that fly between Europe and Africa, and by lowering the sensitivity, or in this case, in rising the sensitivity, it does a lot of false alarms.
Last week, the terror group claimed to have hit an Iron Dome battery near Ramot Naftali. Although the IDF reported no such incident, if true, this could pose another significant challenge. Since the start of cross-border exchanges between the Israeli military and Hezbollah on October 8th, it is estimated that over 1,000 UAVs have been launched toward Israel, many equipped with explosives or used for intelligence gathering. But it's the recent surge in Hezbollah drones evading Israeli defenses that raises the question, could this be one of the reasons Israel is drilling for a ground operation in Lebanon?
It's about how do we bring the people back home over here in the north and giving them security, not only a sense of security. And it's not only about UAVs, it's also about the anti-tank missiles. That there is no answer to these anti-tank missiles. There are no attacks. There is no Iron Dome around against that. And of course, with regard to Radwan Brigade, if there will be a ceasefire, who will promise us that they are not going to recover their capabilities in South Lebanon? So the question is much bigger than that. And we all agree up here in the north that we cannot accept another ceasefire that will not deal with the capabilities of Hezbollah.
Back to the studio. With me here are former Ambassador Michael Harari and Lieutenant Colonel Doron Avital. Let's start with you about the situation over there. Very dangerous game played by Hezbollah on one hand and Israel on the other hand, trying not to make it all-out war, but it's dangerous.
Yeah, what we call a dialogue in fire within some boundaries of the equation. We are a bit not surprised, but they've shown capabilities, those drones, those UAVs, and of course those anti-tank missiles. And we have to consider what to do. This is a war of attrition. They are trying to wear us down. They are paying dearly, I mean, in terms of what we hit them, but still our citizens are not back in their places. I think the only thing which is not a sign of hope, but the only thing that differs from the Gaza that we have an end end game at sight. Israel doesn't think in terms of dismantling Hezbollah. This is not the context that we are right now discussing. We're discussing the 1701 resolution of the UN, the Litani border, the withdrawal of Hezbollah there, and if it can be done diplomatically, sure. Of course, we have to prepare and create the capability, the military capability for a military campaign in case it doesn't happen, and also as a leverage for the diplomatic discussion. But this is the end game we want, and this is an end game that would allow us to bring our citizens.
Let's ask the diplomat in the room. Is there a chance for a diplomatic agreement there?
I think the Americans do believe that there is a chance, but it's pending of the ceasefire or the end of the war in Gaza. If it doesn't happen, so miscalculation or the situation is extremely dangerous.
If it does happen?
If it does happen, there is an understanding, I think, by the Americans based on contacts that they did have with us and the Lebanese and Hezbollah, that the road is to implement 1701. It doesn't mean to implement fully 1701, but start implementing, which means, let's say, withdraw of Hezbollah forces 20 or 30 kilometers as a stage, or the first stage, let's say, for implementing, maybe just, discussing the land border, etc., etc. From the American point of view, if there is ceasefire in Gaza, even a temporary ceasefire, it will enable them, let's say, not to solve, but to hold this situation in Lebanon diplomatically.
In a way that Israeli citizens will be satisfied to go back home?
This is a big question, of course, yes. Israel will need to decide whether it is satisfied in order to call its citizens to go back, let's say. Israel will need to make sure that it understands that this ceasefire or this whatever we call it, is stable enough. But again, the problem is that all depends on Gaza. Because if the war in Gaza resumes after 6, 8, whatever weeks, let's say, then the same happens in Lebanon.
I think the end game of the Litani border or the 1701 is the end game that can allow us to bring our citizens. Also, Israelis should understand there's no airtight defense. But what is true, that once if we reach this by diplomatic means, our philosophy of defense should change from a defense that is passive, closing us into a defense which was more like in the 80s when we were in Lebanon, all the time engaging the enemy, making sure that he holds the line of the 1701. We didn't do it after 2006. We allowed them to come into the border.
You think Hezbollah will accept 1701?
I think otherwise it's a war. We shouldn't forget the diplomat is that it's also a Lebanese organization, and the Lebanese, they really do, if they fear terribly a war. For us to hit Lebanese infrastructure, to cause devastation in Beirut, also I'm not sure those are sides that the world can see right now after Gaza. So this pressure can create this
Hezbollah will accept the title, the umbrella of 1701. Let's go ahead towards 1701. And as you said, of course, Hezbollah is very careful, let's say, to make sure that the Lebanese public opinion is with him as much as possible. So yes, it may happen pending ceasefire.
Okay. Meanwhile, drama in Israeli politics. In less than an hour, Benny Gantz is expected to leave the so-called unity government. Gil Hoffman from Honest Reporting is with us. Good evening.
Good evening.
So Netanyahu is left tonight with the extreme right. Where is this going?
Look, this marriage between Netanyahu and Benny Gantz was doomed to failure. I was there when Benny Gantz entered politics with the goal of replacing Netanyahu. And since then, he's joined twice, once when there was a pandemic and now when there's a war. And he has been misled by Netanyahu time and time again. And Netanyahu declined to pass a budget that Israel desperately needed just in order to make sure that Gantz would leave him and it wouldn't become prime minister. And here also, he's tricked him over and over and over again. There's only so much a man can take. And if that means temporarily, until Netanyahu is being brought down, having the coalition that was initially formed, Gantz has to let it happen and start building himself up as the alternative.
So what are the prospects of elections anytime soon?
Well, there is a no confidence vote that Gantz's party submitted. There are others that other parties submitted that could be heard before July 15th, when the Knesset would disperse for the summer and then for the holidays. It's pretty unlikely that it can pass when there's still a war that's intense going on two fronts. But when they come back in October, it would be immediately after October 7th and immediately after Simchat Torah, so the anniversary of the start of the war and the terrible debacle under Netanyahu's leadership. And that would probably lead to a groundswell of people who at that point would perhaps put so much pressure that there could be a rebellion inside the 64, which is really what could bring Netanyahu down.
I'm not hearing any intention by Netanyahu to resign amid the October 7th disaster or take responsibility.
No, Netanyahu's young. His father died at the age of 102. If he could last for another 20 years in Israeli politics, he would try. He's still younger than both candidates for president of the United States, right?
Yeah, that's true. Gil Hoffman, thank you very much for that.
Pleasure.
Let me go back to the studio and ask you, under these conditions, 64 government with the extreme right, does Netanyahu have a mandate to go to another war in the north, for example?
I think not. I don't think he has the leverage to do many things. Do a hostage deal, for example, which is required if we want to prevent a war, and then to go to war also to rely on the army. When he had this war cabinet with people like Gantz and Eisenkot that are very well connected to our generals, in the end, the IDF has to do what has been ordered. It's not an easy task. It's a tall order now to conquer Lebanon in the context of these three fronts that we are conducting, and to do it without sync with the US. So I don't see Netanyahu going to those adventures, because he understands that this can be a terrible fallout on his behalf. But he's locked in this government, so I'm not sure what he would do. And the hostage deal will be the first dilemma that he would face after Benny Gantz is leaving.
I think that Netanyahu does have a mandate, let's say, to keep on this present situation, which means war in Gaza and how to call it, let's say, some kind of
war of attrition.
That's right, yes, in Lebanon. He can do it. Think about one more element. This government, this radical government, Netanyahu, will be seen as the moderate, isn't it? That's right. This is paradox, but this is the situation. Take one more element, let's say, in consideration. Netanyahu is invited to Washington to address the Congress, July 24th. So the next few weeks looks not too bad, I suppose. I mean, from Netanyahu's point of view, he knew that Gantz will withdraw sooner or later. Okay, this is, the timetable. So I think that he can keep on. I mean, okay, until October, as Gil Hoffman said, and it depends with how much public pressure will how many people will go out to the streets after Gantz withdraw. Because there is no deal. Exactly. And because Gantz is not there. So why not? I mean, just, to increase the pressure, the public pressure.
I think even Houdini had his last trick and failed, so I don't know. He's Il Magico, but he would have one last trick and then he would fail.
No doubt Netanyahu is the Houdini of Israeli politics. Exactly. We've seen this for many years, and he's still there 8 months after this October 7th. And you're talking about July, and who knows, Hoffman talked about even after that. Let's go to eastern Syria. A car bombing struck the eastern Syrian city of Deir Azor yesterday, and Turkey resumed airstrikes against Kurdish supporters. So the tension is rising ahead of the planned Kurdish elections this summer. We have journalist Badr Khan Ahmad with us from Kamishli. Thank you very much for joining us. Tell us what's happening there and what will happen if Turkey keeps attacking as it said it would.
Living with a little not stability and stress with what Turkey is doing. This is what Turkey is doing from a while to a while, and specifically on the 31 of May, the Turkish, or specifically the president of Turkey, Erdogan, announced that they will not allow a Kurdish presence, which they consider as the people here as terrorists, that if there will be any elections that going on in the region, that their army will start to invade the region again, as they did in 2019 and 2016 in North Syria. At the same time, there was a car bomb in Deir ez-Zor that was yesterday on Saturday. This car bomb was a vehicle belonging to Iranian fighters or members. It was this car has been with someone. The perpetrators are still unknown, but 2 members of them got killed and other injured. And this was in Al-Qusur neighborhood inside the city, which is close to the Iranian cultural center. Let's back to the situation of northeastern Syria, specifically where I'm living, which is Qamishli. And in the same day, the Turkey did some threats because the Kurdish administration or the self-administration is preparing for some local elections, which will be about the municipalities in the region. So in the same day, in the 31 of May, that they did some threats, they start to do some attacks in some positions, let's say around Qamishli in the countryside. And there was also another location which is close to Al-Hol camp, which holds ISIS families there. In these attacks, there were 4 fighters members from Syrian Democratic Forces got killed, and also more than 11 civilians they get injured because there were some civilian houses also get damaged with these strikes. So what the self-administration did after that, they, of course, because there was also an American warning that, or the US warning that the conditions now are not suitable for the election. So, and because there were some parties in this council, they asked for delay. So they delayed until August 11, but still Turkey is not giving up that if there will be any elections going on in the region, they will do an invasion or an attack against the region. And of course, this not stability, it's not helping the region, which is leading more people to go to Europe, to go abroad of Syria, and it's also not helping the economic situation in this region.
All right, Badr Khan Ahmed, thank you very much from Qamishli. A word about Israel following what's happening in Syria. What are the ramifications for Israel?
I don't think there is nowadays direct implications, but it's very much interesting to see the Turkish, let's say, policy, because the Turks now feel more freely in many ways, let's say, to intervene militarily in the region there. The Americans, as the correspondent said, has warned them, let's say, to delay those elections. So these are, let's say, the most immediate, I would say, implications if the elections will take place. From Israel's point of view, nowadays Israel is too busy with its own...
The only thing about Syria is, of course, Russia. Russia was conducting an exercise with the military, the Syrian military. So we have to look at Syria, how we operate, how freely we can operate. We shouldn't forget that once the anti-aircraft Syrian succeeded to intercept a Russian airplane with 23 dead. Following our attacks, we have to be very careful with this front. And new big friend.
There is a very interesting development that we should, let's say, follow between Syria and Iran. There are a lot of reports that Assad is trying, let's say, to distance himself as much as possible. He did not go to the funeral of Raisi. He went only about, I think, a week ago. So, and there are a lot of speculations, I suppose, about it. I don't think that he can, let's say, distance himself totally, discontent, of course, yes, but he's starts.
Cautious, very cautious.
Yes.
At this point, I thank you very much, Dorana Vital and Michael Harari. Thank you very much for that. Now, the Persian Gulf Bridge Project. That's a big project with some big problems. Bastian Boré in Dubai, good evening to you. Tell us what's happening there.
Well, Iran is basically trying to take control of 3 tiny Gulf islands, which are actually large enough to be inhabited and to be of geopolitical interest. The Revolutionary Guards are going to build hundreds of housing units on them, which will be able to accommodate thousands of people in addition to the ones who already live there. And within this population, there are and there will be civilians to whom Iran will offer free land and bank loans to build additional housing. And there will also be, but Iran will not admit this publicly, soldiers tasked with monitoring the region with a whole bunch of military observation and interception equipment. because these bits of land are right in the middle of the Persian Gulf, about 40 kilometers from Dubai, where, as you know, a quarter of the world's oil and gas trade transits. Hence, the importance of these islands, which offer to those who own them almost total control over all the ships entering and leaving the Gulf.
Now, Iranian allies like China and Syria, they are also backing the UAE's claim. What's happening with that?
Well, the problem is that both the UAE and Iran are right. Until 1921, these islands remained part of the Persian Empire, although the Emiratis were also allowed to exploit their subsoil. Then from 1921, the three islands fell under the control of the British Empire, and until 1971, during which time the British entrusted the Emiratis with the administration of these islands. And in 1971, within hours of the departure of the British troops, the Iranians sent their army to seize them. So today the Emiratis feel that these islands should have been theirs because the British had ceded them. And the Iranians say, no, we got back what was ours, because before that they had always belonged to the Persians. So from a legal point of view, it's inextricable because both are right. And we've reached a point where the solution will either come from the International Court of Justice or, and this is unwelcome, from military intervention. And you're right, the Emiratis are playing the diplomacy card because they have the support not only of the US and Europe, but even Iran's allies, like Russia, like China, like Syria. Russia and China are backing the UAE precisely because the Iranians regularly intercept oil tankers there and disrupt world trade. And as for the Syrians, this was the price they had to pay to be reintegrated in the Arab League and distance themselves from Iran. So all this is a test for relations between Iran and the Gulf, and it's not only disputes. There are other demarcation disputes between Iran and Saudi Arabia, between Kuwait and Iraq, and so on and so forth.
All right, very interesting. Bastien Bori, thank you very much. In Dubai tonight. Saudi Arabia's GDP is shrinking, the economy. So our economy expert, Dr. Alex Coleman, is here. Good evening to you.
Good evening. Pleasure.
First of all, what's happening? Why? It's been a while already. This is all about oil?
It's all about oil. I mean, they've had some attempts to move into green energy, etc. There's been a lot of talk, but not a lot of work. I mean, we didn't see enough action. Even Saudi Aramco, which was at the time, it was the largest initial public offering in the history of the world. It has lost 6% over the last 5 years, which is surprising because when you think about what Putin did to Europe, what he did to oil prices, and how we all struggled to pay the price of oil, you would have expected it to go up. But I think that the world, was so traumatized by Putin's actions that the effort to move into green energy is multiplied. And also, I am not impressed by Saudi management. Well, the thing with Saudi Aramco is that Saudi holds 90% of the company. So I would never buy shares in a company where I am a tiny speck.
But there's an offering now, and the world is buying billions.
I know.
Billions.
I know. They just floated 11 billion. Which is small money because it's worth 1.8 trillion. So the proportions are different. But why would I want to be part of a company where I have no say on the decision making? Because the only interest that the company is so dominated by Saudi Arabia that it only takes care of Saudi interests. And I'm sure you heard about this project NEOM to build this gargantuan joke in the desert. I think this is the way I look at it, this megalomaniac desire to show that we are the biggest, the tallest, independent of reality. So that's not what you want to see in a manager, in a strategist.
Wait, they used to call it think big.
Think big, but right? How big?
Yeah.
I did a project for Teva once, and they taught me that the difference between medicine and poison is the quantity. So the best medicine that fights your headache, you take enough of it, it will kill you. So think big. If you think too big, it will kill you.
But the plan is to take over the UAE as the center point of the Gulf financially.
Yes. But where will
they failing in this?
I think so. I mean, they did a massive effort because all the foreigners wanted to be in the UAE because it was much more liberal than Saudi Arabia. So they played with it, and also they had some carrots and they had some sticks, and they forced them into Saudi Arabia. But I think it's very much against their spirit or their mentality. So I'm skeptical. I mean, when I see a company that's 90% held by one shareholder, I stay away from it. I know they did sell 11 billion.
Yeah,
but what's 11 billion
to foreigners? Between you and me, it's nothing. Now, the whole normalization scheme with Israel, the United States, the agreements, and how's that, in their point of view, you think comes into place with this kind of reality?
Well, I mean, we've been talking about the demise of oil for a long time, and oil did not listen to us because it did very well. But it's obvious that in the long term, even if you look at Saudi forecasts for oil sales, diesel, etc., it all goes down. So they want to show that they are into green energy, into high tech, into commerce. And Israel is the status of when you start startup nation, all these feathers. So we would fit very well with them because they have so much desert, so much sun. We can help them desalinate, make energy from the sun, from the wind. We fit like a glove if there weren't this political turmoil.
And oil prices will still go up?
They will zigzag, but in the long term, they will be hurt.
Mm.
I was surprised because you saw how Putin sent them storming, and but now they're going down in spite of the Houthis who are hurting shipping, etc.
Yeah, well, it's an election year in the United States, you know.
When is the election year with the Houthis?
We'll see about that. Dr. Alex Cohen, thank you very much.
Thank you, pleasure.
This is it for us here. Stay tuned for more news with Kalev Ben David here on I-24 News. Have a good night from Tel Aviv.
Life.
And they never should have been abducted by Hamas. Our collective voice.
כבר בשעה 10:30 בתוך ארמגדון.
A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות I-24 News.
I-24 News launches its 4th channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
I-24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, I-24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on I-24 News.
Welcome to this special broadcast on I-24 News. I'm Caleb Ben David. It is day 247 of Israel's war against Hamas, and a rare day during this conflict in which the Israeli public is still basking in the glow of yesterday's rescue of 4 hostages from Gaza. Noah Argamani, Almog Meir-Jan, Shlomo Ziv, and Andrei Kozlov celebrated their first full day of freedom after being rescued from the Nusrat refugee camp in a daring daytime operation by IDF police and Shin Bet forces. The mission is being compared to the raid on Entebbe, and like Operation Yoni, it was named today as Operation Arnon in honor of the sole Israeli casualty, Chief Inspector Arnon Zamora of the Amman Police Commando Unit. Now, as Israelis celebrated, its critics focused on Palestinian casualties, which Hamas says was more than 200, and the IDF says was less than half that. Meanwhile, both supporters and opponents of a hostage release forced ceasefire deal claimed the rescue as justification for their positions. And War Cabinet member Benny Gantz, who canceled his planned address last night, is set to announce this evening that he and his National Unity Party colleague, Gadi Eisenkot, are leaving the government and the War Cabinet. We'll bring you Gantz's address live. First, more on Operation Arnon and its aftermath in this report from senior correspondent Bianca Zanini.
Thank you for bringing my son to me, to us. I'm so excited that I could hug him today.
Joy and celebration as Israel marked the rescue and safe return of 4 hostages held in Gaza for 8 months. Sure to boost the battle spirit of soldiers, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took the moment to remind the nation and the world of why he believes Israel must continue the war in Gaza.
This operation required ingenuity and courage of the highest degree.
and our soldiers performed in an unmatchable way. We're committed to getting the release of all the hostages, and we expect Hamas to release them all. But if they don't, we'll do whatever it takes to get them all back home.
The heartwarming moments of families reunited were much needed after weeks, if not months, of growing dissatisfaction with the government's handling of the war. A criticism that has not gone away. Saturday night's weekly protests against the government and to release the hostages continued. But the rescue might have bought Netanyahu some time in the political arena. Saturday was the deadline set by War Cabinet Minister Benny Gantz for the government to dismantle Hamas and present a post-war Gaza plan, amongst other points, or else he would leave. The rescue operation, during which at least 210 Palestinians were reportedly killed, was made with the help of U.S. intelligence.
So I want to echo President Macron's comments welcoming the safe rescue of 4 hostages that were returned to their families in Israel. We won't stop working until all the hostages come home and a ceasefire is reached. That is essential.
The big question now, how, if at all, does this rescue operation affect the possibility of a ceasefire for hostages deal coming to fruition?
There are still 120 hostages in Gaza, and we want a deal now. We want them to come back home as soon as possible.
I will just add that, according to reports, both Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot did not take part in the meeting of the War Cabinet this evening, an indication of their resignation from the government. And as I said, we'll bring you Benny Gantz's comments when his press briefing begins. In the meantime, we have in studio Asaf Sharif, former Israeli Consul General to New York and a former senior advisor to the late Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's chief of staff, and Brigadier General in the IDF Reserves Israel Relic Shafir. He's the former commander of Tel Nof Air Force Base and a former, of course, ace combat pilot. Relic, I didn't mean to, I should have mentioned maybe the Air Force, because air support was also played a crucial role here in a couple of aspects in this operation. We saw, of course, those scenes of those helicopters taking off. But I want to get your takeaways on this operation, which, again, people comparing it to Entebbe, but in terms of what went on in Gaza, kind of unprecedented in both the complexity, the challenges, and of course how efficiently it was carried out.
Well, what is similar is the surprise that in both cases the defenders, so to speak, were surprised both in Entebbe in '76 and yesterday. So the Air Force provided a wall of fire so that anybody that got close to our forces was hit either by UAVs or helicopter fire, or combat helicopters or fighter airplanes. So that prevented a lot of casualties, because anybody that had gotten near was shot.
Right. I mean, we're on the Israeli side. If obviously there were Palestinians.
Those who had gotten close were obviously Hamas terrorists, not civilians. So I would venture to say that most of those Palestinians who were hit were Hamas operatives who rushed to the scene and to try to put up a fight. Lucky for us, they weren't successful. The plan apparently was successful. There's not much of a borderline between failure and success, but in this particular case, unfortunately, we lost one of the warriors, but basically the operation was successful. It doesn't mean that the next one will be successful, but it does show resolution and will to take chances, and this is something that I think inspired a lot of Israelis who feel that we're in a dire state at this time.
Right. And let's, Asaf, let's put it now in the bigger, that's on the security side, let's put it in the bigger context of the conduct of the war in Gaza. Let's leave aside Benny Gantz and that aspect of it until we hear what he has to say. But just in terms of what I said before, there are those who say this justifies the conduct of the war being going forward as a military operation. Others say this should give impetus now Israel morphed dealing from a position of strength to try to reach a hostage deal.
Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. As you said, each side is making it as proof to him being right. But even before what happened in Gaza, yesterday wasn't a regular day in the history of Israel. It was one of the happiest and memorable days we have witnessed.
Right, coming during one of the lowest points.
Exactly. Noah's, after October 7th, Noah's kidnap on the motorcycle shouting was one of the symbols of the failure of Israel's army on October 7th, and yesterday was the opposite. And her being back in Israel was really a happy day, and hopefully will bring a new momentum to this operation in Gaza. You said not to mention Gantz now. We'll discuss it later, but I don't think it will have effect on the war going forward.
All right. Well, of course, we want to most of all know about the condition of the those released. Let's go to Zach Anders, correspondent who's at the Sheba Medical Center in Ramat Gan, where the 4 hostages were taken from Gaza. And Zach, just update us what we know about the condition and just, of course, the atmosphere there. We just showed in the report, and we'll see some more, some of the scenes, the incredibly emotional scenes that have taken place there at Sheba.
Yeah, that's right. And from what we've been able to tell from the doctors, it continues to be the same report as we got yesterday. Good condition, good overall for all of them. The 3 men that were freed are still here at Sheba. The expectation is that potentially tonight, 1 or 2 of them could leave. They all, apparently, as we're hearing from the family, they all want to go home, but under precautionary measures by the doctors are still being observed. It does appear that there's no findings of any physical necessary treatment that's needed right away for any physical trauma. Emotional trauma, that's a whole other story, and the team of specialists are here and apparently have been able to consult, but that is a long road and will be a very long road ahead. From what we know about Noah in particular, her family has shared a bit. You know, she's moved to the other hospital to be with her mother who's got terminal brain cancer. It does sound like that her cancer has progressed to a very severe stage, and obviously for those of us who have friends or family who experience something like this know that with very aggressive brain cancer that it's a very difficult, it's very painful. So Noah moving from one tragedy to the next for her. It does seem like they were able to communicate a little bit, but verbally it's a whole other story. Very difficult there. From what Noah's family is sharing as well is a bit about what she experienced inside Channel 12, reporting through the family that she had spent so much time with the family that was tasked with holding her captive that she interacted with them so much and learned to speak Arabic over the course of those 240 plus days.
Right, and I think actually she commented that when that just was the first time she spoke Hebrew in 8 months. When she, I think I saw there was some audio of her saying that. So you could, even though they were in their physical condition, there was some malnutrition, I think, reported on some of the things. Just what they're going through emotionally now, the readjustment that's going to take someone. One has to imagine it'll take some time.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think back to the last hostage release when we were here in November, that was something that the doctors then said was starting to present immediately, right away, that the signs of trauma were there. Now, this time, we have not received any update about mental health or any of the psychological impact to this point, other than initial good morale, that, you know, smiles ear to ear for all of them, and that they were so happy to be back home. There's a video, too, of Omag, who, you know, tragically, his father reportedly died just hours before the operation, so had no knowledge that this was underway, that this was in motion, that his son was on his way back. He died at just 57 years old. But there's some great footage of Omag here at Sheba, meeting with his friends. He walks around the corner. All his friends are kind of staged, and he sees them, puts his arms up into the air, pumps his fist, and just starts screaming yes. And all his friends mob him and circle around him. So, you know, the highest highs, the lowest lows emotionally, and that's going to take a lot of time for some of those wounds to heal.
Right, for sure. We're seeing that, some of that footage, the scenes, the incredible scenes there at the hospital. Zach Anders, thank you for that, Sheba Medical Center. Now, following the immediate surprise from yesterday's successful liberation of the 4 Israeli hostages from Gaza, some Arab countries, such as Egypt and Jordan, condemned Israel's operation. Despite much outrage in the streets amid the Palestinian death toll, other governments have been fairly muted on the matter, signaling their contentment with the operation that embarrassed Hamas. Our Middle East correspondent Ariel Osran has more.
Saturday's daring daytime operation in the heart of central Gaza caught Hamas completely by surprise. And also in the region, there was much focus on the Hollywood-like operation. Saudi English-speaking newspaper Arab News focused on the high death toll based on Hamas numbers, while Asharq al-Awsat carried the headline, "Hostage rescue in Gaza turns into a bloodbath." Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas said he would request an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council following the raid on the Nuseirat refugee camp.
حيث أدانت مصر بأشد العبارات في بيان صادر عن وزارة الخارجية أدانت الاعتداءات الإسرائيلية على مخيم النصيرات بوسط قطاع غزة في انتهاك سافر لكافة أحكام القانون الدولي والقانون الدولي الإنساني ولجميع قيم الإنسانية وحقوق الإنسان.
In a similar condemnation, Jordan said it holds Israel responsible for the high death toll in Nuseirat, as dozens gathered outside the Israeli consulate in Amman in protest. Kuwait, Oman, and Turkey also condemned the operation. Similar demonstrations were held in multiple cities across Morocco, while in the West Bank city of Nablus, protesters called on Hamas's military wing to increase terror attacks. Beyond the high death toll, which does not differentiate between civilians and combatants, some of the criticism among Arab-speaking media was the alleged use of an aid truck by Israeli forces as cover, as well as the exfiltration of the hostages while using the American aid pier in Gaza. Some users on social media even went as far as calling Saturday's operation the American operation. While the IDF denies the allegations, it illustrates how a single incident can sway Arab public opinion against Israel. As for their governments, they have remained mostly muted in the wake of the attack, seen as an embarrassment to Hamas and an impressive yet tactical achievement by Israel.
I mean, Relic, we should note, some Palestinian sources are claiming American soldiers were involved in the operation. What would be the extent of the U.S. involvement in this kind of operation?
This is probably eavesdropping on the Hamas channels. That sort of data transfer that might have taken place. Nothing more than that.
Right, and Asaf, you mentioned this would probably not impact on the war going forward. What about on the role we see in the what it does in terms of both Israel in relation to some of the, especially some of the countries like Egypt and Jordan that we hope that at least are hoping to expect to play some kind of positive role moving forward in Gaza?
Yesterday was a very embarrassing day for Hamas and for the Palestinian in Gaza. And they're trying to find new stories about the Americans, and now the new narrative about the numbers of civilians that were killed. The IDF didn't put the hostages in the market. We came there to rescue them because Hamas put them there. That's why there were so many civilians. But regarding to your question about the countries, tomorrow will be a new day. There will be new stories. I don't see any long-term implications on this issue.
All right. Now, as we said, the sole Israeli casualty from yesterday's rescue mission was Chief Inspector Arnon Zamora. Jody Notelowitz has more on this fallen hero.
The 8th of June is a day that will stay long in the memories of the Israeli people. What is being described as a miracle operation, resulting in the rescue of 4 hostages after 8 months of captivity in Gaza. The joint IDF, Shin Bet and police operation, originally named Seeds of Summer, was made possible by the courage of the elite fighters within these services. Heroes like Arnon Zamora, one of the leaders of the operation. Chief Inspector Arnon Zamora was a commander and fighter in the Police Special Forces Unit Yamam, also known as the National Counter-Terrorism Unit. Yamam is one of 4 special units within the Israeli border police. It is capable of both hostage rescue operations and defensive raids against terrorist targets in civilian areas. On October the 7th, Zamora fought against Hamas near the Gaza border community of Yad Mordechai, killing dozens of terrorists and preventing them from infiltrating the kibbutz and spreading further into the country. After that battle, Zamora was also involved in fighting terrorists at the Nahal Oz base and at Kibbutz Be'eri. But during the mission on Saturday in Nuseirat, central Gaza, he was critically wounded and later succumbed to his wounds. Zamora was just 36 years old and leaves behind a wife and 2 children. Tributes came flooding in. His wife, Michal, writes,
"The image of the hero, Arnon Zamora, may he rest in peace, is now everywhere. But long before he was a fighter and a hero, he was a sweet and charming man, an amazing partner, a perfect father, a loving and beloved man."
Ahead of Arnon's funeral, the cousin and father of one of the rescued hostages, Shlomi Ziv, gave thanks to Arnon, recognizing that without him, their reunion may not have been possible.
Him, that Shlomi is here with us, and we want to say thank you, and we want to say that we are with them. I mean, we have no words. It's because of him, because he was the hero, that our beloved people are with us, and everybody, all of Israel, should be grateful now for our soldiers, for our army. Baruch Hashem.
And in a final tribute, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that the Operation Seeds of Summer would now be recognized as Operation Arnon.
And joining us now in studio for more is Master Sergeant Dean Elsdun. He's the international spokesperson for the Israel Police. Dean, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, talk to us now about Arnon Zamora and also about the Yamam. Seeing them and hearing about them in operation there in the heart of Gaza, this is somewhat exceptional.
You know, there's so much I can tell you, both about Arnon, both about the Yamam, but really what I want to say is, besides him being a commander, besides him being so brave and heroic and really being the face of this nation right now, bringing home 4 hostages so they can reunite with their family, more than all of that, he was a father to Noam, to Itai. He was a husband to Michal. And when he went home, he took off his uniform and he laughed. He played with them. He was one of many of our nation that wanted no more than to bring the hostages home. And that's what he did. And he paid for it with his life. And I guarantee you, 100 times over, he would do it all over again. And there's no better way to honor his memory than to really recognize and celebrate his life, celebrate all the missions he went on that we don't even know.
Right.
This came to air, this one it's been released, and now the public knows about it. But just imagine how many more lives have been saved because of him, because of his teammates.
Right, and we mentioned that his actions even on October 7th in Yad Mordechai and much more. Tell us, let's talk about Yamam, because again, people know more, for example, about the Sayeret Matkal, the elite army units, than they do about this particular unit.
Tip of the spear. There is no better in the world other than Yamam. Whether it's hostage rescue, whether it's counterterrorism missions, they are the ones that engage directly with the terrorists who, at a moment's notice, they get intelligence that somebody wants to commit an attack and they're ready to intercept them. That means that they need to be trained around the clock, every day of the year. If they're not on an operational mission, they're training for it. Different types of missions. You see right now, just imagine what it is to go into a very hostile environment like Gaza, where you're surrounded by terrorists, where the civilians may very well possibly be complicit with the Hamas terrorists.
I mean, I was going to ask you, but you jumped. I think we can assume in this case they were complicit because we know that the hostages were being held in private apartments rather than in tunnels, maybe counting on the fact that this would prevent Israel from rescuing him.
2 main things that we need to discuss. One is the fact that Hamas is holding our hostages, civilian hostages, in civilian areas. That should be the real question of the entire world, not just the international media. And the second one is the fact that we still have civilians that are being held hostage. Why is that not the main focus? Can you imagine how complex and how tough it must be for them to go in knowing that there are those waiting for them? If they don't accomplish their mission, those loved ones, the ones that we saw reunited with their families, it's up to them. They're not going to be reunited. That's the responsibility he had on his shoulders, and that's just one mission that we know of. So I salute him, but more than anything, really, if I can take this opportunity, I want to salute his wife. I want to salute Michal.
Right. I would just want to mention, we did show on this report the social media post that she did. I mean, just to be able to post something like that just the day after losing it, not just a husband, of course, but the father of their children.
Yeah, and not just Michal, all the wives. You know, there's over 60 police officers. There's hundreds of soldiers. There's hundreds of miluimnikim that are on the line. Okay, over 60 police officers fell so far, and I began to say hundreds of officers. The wives are the true definition of strength, the true definition of resilience. They're at home holding down the fort so that our brave men and our brave women can be out there, keeping the promise to bring our loved ones home and to defend our nation so that never again is not just a phrase that we say, but it's a promise we can uphold.
Right. Dean, you alluded to the high casualties of the police on October 7th and the few of the days after, which was an unprecedented blow for the police. For the IDF, they've had experience like this, Second Lebanon War, even going back to Lebanon, Yom Kippur, but for the police, unprecedented. Yeah. So what does a day like yesterday mean just for the morale of the police ranks after having experienced that day like October 7th?
We know our work. We know our work. Arnon's work, even though it came out to the rest of the world, you know, late last night, we know what we do every single day to be the bulletproof vest of our nation. That's what the Israel police and the border police was on October 7th. That's what they were before, and that's what they're going to be every day since. When there is a danger, our officers are going to run into the line of fire to be the ones that separate the civilians from the threat.
All right. Certainly we do have to, again, salute this hero. As it was said, the operation will be named, is now named.
Operation Arnon.
Right. Asaf, did you want to say?
I can assure you that the name Arnon in 2025 will be extremely popular for newborns in Israel.
I would think so. As
Definitely.
Alluding to way, Yonatan Netanyahu, his name, of course, in the time following Operation Entebbe. And this will go down together, certainly, with in the Entebbe rescue as a high point for the security forces and in particular for the police. And the Yamam Nunat, Dean Elsdoon, thank you for joining us from the Israel Police. I'm going to ask Asaf Shariv and Relic Shafir to stay with us. I do remind you, we are expecting, just really in the coming minutes, to hear Benny Gantz, the leader of the National Unity Party, to officially announce his resignation from the government, and Gadi Eisenkot from the War Cabinet. And of course, we'll discuss the meaning of that going forward. Stay with us on this special broadcast, day 247, and one of the brighter days of Israel's war against Hamas. We'll be right back in a few minutes.
On October 7th, the shocking attack of Hamas resulted in the devastation of more than 20 communities in southern Israel, the murder of 1,400 innocent people, and more than 253 hostages. KKL-JNF immediately assisted in the evacuation efforts of the survivors, purchased new ambulances, and sponsored psychological support for traumatized children and adults. KKL-JNF Switzerland is determined to rebuild these destroyed communities of Eretz Kharkim again so that the families can return home. Join us now.
Welcome back to this special broadcast on I-24 News, day 247. And as I've been saying, a relatively bright day, maybe one of the brightest of the past 8 months. Now, it's hard to imagine, though, anyone being more overjoyed at yesterday's rescue of the 4 hostages than their parents. Now, Noah Argamani was freed in time to see her mother, Leora, who has stage 4 terminal brain cancer, and said her last wish was to meet her daughter again, a wish that was granted last night at Tel Aviv's Ichilov Hospital. Now, as we mentioned, tragically, the timing did not work out for Almog Meir-Jan. His father, Yossi, unbelievably died of a heart attack just hours before his son was rescued, never knowing of his liberation. And the parents of Andrei Kozlov, who live in Russia, arrived here on a flight early today and were reunited with their son at Sheba Hospital. Let's take a brief listen.
We are very happy to see that he is healthy. He looks healthy, looks happy. He is infinitely happy that he is back home. We are infinitely happy to see him. He laughs, he jokes, he enjoys communicating with all of us, with his family, with doctors, with the people who surround him. He is open to communication. He told us that every day in captivity, he thought about his family and those people who were close to him. These thoughts helped him survive, and these thoughts helped him stay alive, healthy and sane, in his own mind.
And earlier, I-24 News' Emily Francis spoke with the father of Shlomo Ziv, this Noach, and his cousin Liat Ariel, who acted as a translator for Noach. Here's what they had to say.
We're so happy. We just can't believe. We don't have the words yet. We're still processing the fact that Shlomi is here with us. And Shlomi is okay. He looks sick, faint. He looks tired after a long month surviving there. But he's with us, and he's now taking all the doctor visits and everything that is needed in order to see, to check his mental and also his physical condition. But he's fine. He's smiling. He's with us. We were hugging him yesterday. Yes. He's speaking, sharply. So it's more than we could ever imagine.
Are you happy?
Yes, Noach. Thank you for joining us. I want to ask you. Yes. Can you answer us in English, or do we need to travel? How are you?
I'm Israel. Hi.
I'm Israel. Hi.
I'm Israel. Hi.
Yay. Oh my gosh.
I'm Israel. Hi. I'm Israel.
Wow. Wow, you're a good dancer. You're a good dancer. Wow, nice.
Father.
Hi. Ferrari. Come, Israel.
Wow, you're great. It's so happy to see you all smiling. I have been on this journey with many of you for months, and just to have him home, and I know.
Thank you very much.
What has he been able to tell you about the experience? Has he been able to talk about it?
אני לא ישבתי איתו, עדיין לא דיברתי איתו על הנושא הזה, לא יצאנו לדבר בשושו, ככה שאני לא יודע בדיוק, אבל הוא בסדר, נראה טוב, ברוך השם, הוא דואג לי יותר מאשר אני דואג לו.
Shlomi's father is saying that Shlomi, we didn't have the time. There were so many people. We didn't have the time to sit with him privately and speak with him about whatever he has went through during this activity. We know that he went through a lot. We can see it on his face. We can see it on his eyes. He did not share it. What happened there exactly? All we know, and his father says here that Shlomi is worried about him more than about himself. Keeps asking him, how are you, father? How are you? Are you okay? Are you fine? Do you need something? It's a miracle, and our praise were answered. And it's just crazy.
Oh, what spirit there. Asaf Sharif and Relik Shafir, thank you. What spirit for that gentleman?
Yeah, the story of Shlomi and Andrei is unique because they were considered dead
Right.
After October 7th, no one saw them.
Right. In contrast to Noah Argamani.
Noah Argamani, and even Almog, when we saw a movie of him. So for them, for the families, that was a huge surprise. That not only they brought them back and alive, it was even more surprising than the others, I think.
Right. Earlier you said stuff that maybe in the eyes of the beholder is in terms of whether to move ahead with a deal or whether to move ahead with fighting. Each will take over. But I want to get your perspective on it, because the return of these hostages is going to impact on the discussion about the hostages and how you both see this going forward.
First of all, we got to admit that the four of them looks relatively healthy, but that doesn't mean that the rest of the hostages look like that.
One reason is, and we'll talk a little more at that, because they were in private homes. They were underground in a tunnel out of the sunlight for
since October 7th, Israel had 3 successful military operations to bring him back. All 3 of them were hostages that were held in private houses, not underground, but over in houses. And we saw other hostages coming back that didn't look like this. So the fact that they look so happy and vivid doesn't mean that the rest of the hostages look like this, and these are the conditions that they are being held. And I guess the families of the other hostages will push this info as much as they can.
I mean, journalistically, I have to mention that Hamas, after this, today now released footage. Of course, we're not going to show propaganda footage that they're claiming are the bodies of 3 hostages that were killed during yesterday's mission. Of course, you would expect Hamas to say something like that.
They did, but they did 2 weeks ago. They announced that Andrei Kozolov is dead.
Right.
2 weeks ago, so we have to take it.
Right. Also, there's no indication that there was any kind of bombing that was done that would impact on the hostages, especially in tunnels or anything like that. You could respond to that, but also your feelings on how this impacts on the discourse over the hostages and those who both call for a hostage deal, and also that those families that, and we have to say, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did meet with families today, after having been criticized about this earlier, families today who have relatives that have fallen in the battle for Gaza, but who have taken the side that battle should continue unabated.
Well, let's put Netanyahu on the side. This is a different issue, and this is a good day, so let's not discuss we
will have to discuss it in a minute when Benny Gantz resigns, and maybe that's part of the criticism, whether he should be doing that today, but we'll get to that.
This activity, the heroic activity, obviously is a joy to everyone, but it also means that Hamas are going to be very vigilant as to their ability to safeguard their cards, and not to mention the fact that we can presume that some of the hostages are no longer in Gaza and had been smuggled out and placed elsewhere in the Middle East. So,
okay, I'm going to interrupt you. Benny Gantz has started to speak.
Citizens of Israel, after October 7th, as hundreds of thousands of Israelis who are patriots had done, so have my friends and I gotten on board. We did so even though we knew that this is a bad government. We did so because we knew it was a bad government. People of Israel, the warriors, the commanders, the families of those murdered, the fallen and hostages needed unity and backup and support like oxygen. And that is why we set up and formed an emergency government, because our fate is shared, not because we shared the political approach. Months after October 7th, the situation in Israel and in the decision-making room has changed. Netanyahu and his partners have turned unity into a call that has no cover in reality. Strategic and fateful decisions are met with political thinking, considerations, and hesitance. And that is why it was an easy decision to go into the government, but to leave the government when the northern residents are not at home and when there are hostages still in tunnels and when there are so many soldiers still on the front lines, it is a very difficult decision. But both decisions have one common denominator: the best interest of the State of Israel. We tried to impact the direction of navigating this ship in closed chambers. But the truth is, the situation in the reality is not simple. This campaign, this war, will take years. I'm not going to promise you a quick and easy victory. You deserve more than empty promises. But the State of Israel needs and can reach true victory. True victory places the return of the hostages above survival in politics and in regime. True victory combines a military victory as well as a civilian and political initiative. True victory will topple Hamas and replace it. True victory means having the northern residents go back home safely. True victory means establishing a regional alliance against Iran together with the United States and the entire Western world. True victory is to change our national priorities, to broaden the circle of servers and those who serve, and to ensure that Israel can meet the challenges it faces, instead of trying to pass a law that is detrimental to Israel's security because of a political debt. Unfortunately, Netanyahu is stopping us from reaching the true victory, which is the true justification for the painful and ongoing price we are paying. And therefore, we are now leaving today the unity government. It is with a heavy heart, but wholeheartedly. We are going for a war over the fate of Israel for generations to come. To ensure true victory, we must, after a year to October 7th, we will go to elections, at the end of which a government will be formed that will be trusted by the population and the citizens and will be able to meet these challenges. I want to call upon Netanyahu to set an election date. Do not allow our nation to be torn apart. We must also set up an inquiry committee that will look into the failures and will defend us against the hypocritical attacks from outside. I would like to call upon heads of all parties and all forces in the public sphere, from left and right, religious and secular, to unite behind me on this journey. We must all work together as one for elections at the end of which we will form a unity government that is Zionist, that is national, and has the best interest at heart, a unity government that is true and genuine. I would like to call upon all members of Knesset in the coalition who understand where we're headed to listen to their conscience. I would like to personally talk to the Minister of Defense, Yoav. We have known one another for many years. Even when there was tension between us, I always respected you and appreciated you. This war has led me to appreciate you even more. You are a bold and determined leader. Above all, you are a patriot. At this time, leadership and valor is not only to say what is right, but to do what is right. There are some who say that we have helped Netanyahu by going into the government with him. He's not the issue here, but the State of Israel is. I know that some say that I am not a hater and I am not a deceitful person like my colleagues, but I can promise you one thing: I will die for your children. The parents sitting at home know that. The hostages' families who have come into my home and my heart know that I will embrace them and I will be there for them always, in fear, in grief, and in God willing, in joy too. I am saying that clearly. My friends and I will always be there at your side if the state needs us. No matter what the political cost, we fear nothing. I have risked my life for this country with terrorist fire many times. A political risk will not be the reflection of my life and will not determine my path. Citizens of Israel, all of our hearts were filled with joy and pride when we saw Noah, Almog, Andre, and Shlomi returning to their home. The price was very painful. We had lost Superintendent Arnon Zamora, who symbolizes the valor and spirit of Israel in this war, like many others do. I would like to strengthen the commanders of the IDF and all the heads of the defense establishment who have gotten up from terrible grief and are running this war professionally, valiantly, and with determination on all fronts. And I would like to strengthen all the warriors. The mission is long. Today, I would like to apologize to the hostages' families. We have done a lot, but we failed in the test, finally. We have not yet had many return to their homes, and it is my responsibility too. Each and every one of them is a world unto themselves. I trust the defense agencies who will do everything in their power to bring them back. I stand behind the outline that we accepted and approved in the War Cabinet, the principles of which were presented by President Biden, and I demand of the Prime Minister to have the valor and courage to stand behind it and do everything in order to promote it. I undertake today as well that when we will be in the opposition, we will support and back up any responsible roadmap. We will support our warriors, Israeli society, at any just step that will be taken by the government. When we go out to demonstrate, we will do so under the law. We will show solidarity and desire to go on a new path, not out of hatred. And I'd like to call upon the citizens of Israel who are serving this country to continue to get called to duty and stand by us. War has a heavy price to pay. More than 1,000 families have paid this price, and thousands have been wounded and will carry the scars of war in their souls and in their bodies. They are the true heroes, and I see them before me every single day in everything I do. Many of my friends have lost their dearest and loved ones in this war. Among them, my partner and friend, Gadi Eisenkot, who over the last 8 months has stood by me for many hours during daytime and nighttime. In the future, his important impact will yet be revealed. I am full of appreciation to his determination to continue to work for life and for the state of Israel. It is a devotion that is unprecedented, and he will continue to serve the state of Israel wherever we will be. Gadi, thank you. Citizens of Israel, even if the place we are at makes it difficult to see, we can do things differently, and we will do things differently. Even in the darkest moments in history, we were a nation that always lifted the banner of hope. After October 7th, we showed our resilience. We showed and proved that we are able and ready for any challenge. We will not go back to October 6th, not ever. Not vis-à-vis our enemies, but more importantly, not among ourselves. I am saying to you with certainty that if we make sure that we are strong inside, we will win and defeat any enemy. And to do that, we must investigate, elect, and come together. The eternal nation is not scared of a long road, and with God's help, we will continue to take the path together. Or from Channel 13 News. Minister Gantz, you said in the past that the only one responsible for the lack of a deal for the return of the hostages is Sinwar. Is that still true? Or have political considerations also been looked at in terms of how the deal is proceeding? Sinwar doesn't care about his own people. He doesn't care about his own men and women. And as far as he's concerned, they can continue to be killed. I expect of us to do everything we can in order to bring our hostages back home. We have said behind closed doors what needs to be done. It's a sensitive topic. I don't want to go into it, but we must exhaust, according to the roadmap that we have set for ourselves, everything that we can do. Channel 12 News, your plan when you joined the government was that your resignation will lead to elections. Right now, it looks like the coalition
All right, we just heard Benny Gantz announce the resignation of his National Unity Party from the government, and of course his resignation and that of Gadi Eisenkot from the War Cabinet. We're joined now by Ben-Dror Yamini, a senior journalist at Yediot Achronot, speaking to us from Tel Aviv. And Ben-Dror, of course, earlier Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in a tweet, said this is not the time for unity and not for division. I call on Benny Gantz, do not leave the emergency government. So your reaction to the fact that he is leaving and he made this decision?
Well, it's not easy. It's not easy because there are many arguments, good arguments from both sides. But let me tell you something. In the last 8 months, actually, the influence of Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot was actually very close to zero. So without any influence, they did not have any reason to stay in this government. It was not a unity government. It was not, because actually whenever Netanyahu had to take any decision, it was according to the pressures of the right, extreme right wing parties, and not according to what the majority in Israel wants. For example, the draft bill law. I mean, they continue just the same, and the ultra-Orthodox are not going to be part of the national effort that we are facing right now. It's just one example, but there are many examples.
So how do you see the consequences of this politically, both for Gantz and also for the Prime Minister?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it will have any impact, because anyway, if they did not influence the government, nothing is going to change. Now, the big question is what is going to happen to Israel, and it's not good. And this is one of the reasons why I'm quite reluctant about this step of Benny Gantz. I'll tell you why, because for the international community right now, Israel was not so much supported. But right now, when this coalition will be composed of only right-wing parties, it's going to be a problem to Israel. Yes, it is going to be a problem, which
right.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy.
Well,
it will not support Israel. Yeah, it will not support Israel.
Right.
For example, in Hague, in the two international courts.
Right. Stay with us. I want to ask Asaf Sharif, you served in the government, in the Prime Minister's office, when there were also resignations. Ironically, Benjamin Netanyahu resigning from the government.
Wasn't the only one, but yes.
But I'm saying
most famous one.
Most famous one. And of course, so I want to see from your perspective as someone who's been by a Prime Minister who experienced a scenario like this, though the circumstances, of course, were completely different.
I think Napoleon said that he doesn't need smart generals, he needs lucky generals. And Gantz's timing was lousy, and he wasn't lucky with the operation yesterday. And everything he said today was related to what we all saw yesterday. I think it's if he would have given this speech 2 weeks ago, it was be received much better, and if hopefully not, but if the situation in the north will be deteriorated, it will be on him, and people would blame him even from the left side. I think he had a good speech, a lot of cliche as you expect from a politician in his position, but I think it's too late, and the timing was really bad for him.
Okay, Prime Minister Netanyahu reacting. I just reported the speech. He says, "My door will remain open to any Zionist party that is ready to get under the stretcher." He's referring to the army when people do these hikes, holding up a stretcher in.
I can assure you this response was written before this.
I'm sure it was. An assistant bringing victory over enemies and ensuring the safety of our citizens. Another expected reaction in Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, demanding to go into the war cabinet. And speaking of the war cabinet, Relik, I have to ask you, whatever influence they had over the war, this means that 2 former IDF chiefs of staff have left the war cabinet, the impact of that on how the war will be conducted.
Well, let's think of a strategic collapse for Netanyahu, because those who can really influence are Naftali Bennett and Yossi Cohen. if they form a political party and they call on some of the Likud members to join them, then, and they can promise them seats in the next government, or at least in the next Knesset, then it'll start a cascading effect. So hopefully for Benny Gantz, if this takes place and he's joined by Bennett and Yossi Cohen, then it'll have a real political impact. Otherwise, it'll just be a more, I would say, divisive issue where Netanyahu is held by Itamar Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, and who will take him to the right field in a way that he's way off the bat.
All right. Well, you sketched out a political scenario that is going to take some time to unfold, and we don't know if that's going to happen.
You've mentioned Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, and both of them they will suffer from this because they have no one to blame.
Okay, we'll have to leave it at that. Ben Dror Yamini, thank you for joining us. Asaf Sharif and Relik Shafir. That brings to an end this special broadcast. We've had some political drama today, but of course the main point is celebration over the return of those 4 hostages from Gaza. And let me just, of course, add my voice to those who hope in any way, be it the rescue or any other way, we will see the return of all the remaining hostages in Gaza as soon as possible. Thank you for joining us.
Tel Aviv.
Thank you.